All day at work, he counted numbers, due diligence for a Chatsford insurance firm. At night, he built the ships or read Civil War books to unwind. He would call me in whenever he was ready to raise the sail. By then, the ship would have been glued fast to the bottom of the bottle. I would come in, and my father would ask me to shut the door. Often, it seemed, the dinner bell rang immediately, as if my mother had a sixth sense for these things. That didn't include her. But when this sense failed her, my job was to hold the bottle for him. "Stay steady," he'd say. "You're my first mate." Gently, he would draw the one string that still reached out the bottle's neck, and voila, the sails all rose, from simple mast to clipper ships. We had our boat. I couldn't clap because I held the bottle, but I always wanted to. My father worked quickly then, burning the end of the string off inside the bottle with a coat hanger he'd heated over a candle. If he did it improperly, the ship would be ruined. Or worse still, the tiny paper sails would catch on fire, and suddenly, in a giant whoosh, I would be handling a bottle of flames in my hand. Eventually, my father built a balsa wood stand to replace me. Lindsay and Buckley didn't share my fascination. After trying to create enough enthusiasm for all three of them, he gave up and retreated to his den. One ship in a bottle was equal to any other as far as the rest of my family was concerned. But as he cleaned that day, he talked to me. "Susie, my baby, my little sailor girl," he said. "You always liked those smaller ones." I watched him as he lined up the ships and bottles on his desk, bringing them over from the shelves where they usually sat. He used an old shirt of my mother's that had been ripped into rags and began dusting the shelves. Under his desk there were empty bottles, rows and rows of them we had collected for our future shipbuilding. In the closet were more ships, the ships he had built with his own father, ships he had built alone, and then those we had made together. Some were perfect, but their sails browned. Some had sagged or toppled over after years. Then there was the one that had burst in flames in the week before my death. He smashed that one first. My heart seized up. He turned and saw all the others, all the years they marked, and the hands that had held them. His dead father's, his dead child's. I watched him as he smashed the rest. He christened the walls and wooden chair with the news of my death. And afterward, he stood in the guest room, then surrounded by green glass. The bottles, all of them, lay broken on the floor, the sails and boat bodies strewn among them. He stood in the wreckage. It was then that, without knowing how, I revealed myself. In every piece of glass, in every shard and sliver, I cast my face. My father glanced down and around him, his eyes roving across the room. Wild. It was just for a second, and then I was gone. He was quiet for a moment, and then he laughed, a howl coming up from the bottom of his stomach. He laughed so loud and deep, I shook with it in my heaven. He left the room and went down the 2 doors to my bedroom. The hall was tiny. My door, like all the others, hollow enough to easily punch a fist through. He was about to smash the mirror over my dresser, rip the wallpaper down with his nails, but instead, he fell against my bed sobbing and balled the lavender sheets up in his hands. "Daddy," Buckley said. My brother held the doorknob with his hand. My father turned, but was unable to stop his tears. He slid to the floor with the sheets still in his fist, and then he opened up his arms. He had to ask my brother twice, which he had never had to do before. but Buckley came to him. My father wrapped my brother inside the sheets that smelled of me. He remembered the day I'd begged him to paint and paper my room purple. Remembered moving in the old National Geographics to the bottom shelves of my bookcases. I had wanted to steep myself in wildlife photography. Remembered when there was just one child in the house for the briefest of time until Lindsay arrived. "You're so special to me, little man," my father said, clinging to him. Buckley drew back and stared at my father's creased face, the fine bright spots of tears at the corners of his eyes. He nodded seriously and kissed my father's cheek. Something so divine that no one up in heaven could have made it up. The care a child took with an adult. My father draped the sheets around Buckley's shoulders. I remembered how it would fall out of the tall four-poster bed and onto the rug, never waking up. Sitting in his study in his green chair and reading a book, he would be startled by the sound of my body landing. He would get up and walk the short distance to my bedroom. He liked to watch me sleep soundly, unchecked by nightmare or even hardwood floor. He swore in those moments that his children would be kings or rulers, or artists or doctors, or wildlife photographers, anything they dreamed they could be. A few months before I died, he had found me like this, but tucked inside my sheets with me was Buckley, in his pajamas, with his bear curled up against my back, sucking deeply on his thumb. My father had felt in that moment the first flicker of the strange, sad mortality of being a father. His life had given birth to 3 children, so the number claimed him. No matter what happened to Abigail or to him, the 3 would have one another. In that way, the line he had begun to seem immortal to him, like a strong steel filament threading into the future, continuing past him no matter where he might fall off, even in deep, snowy old age. He would find his Susie now inside his young son. Give that love to the living. He told himself this, spoke it aloud inside his brain, but my presence was like a tug on him and dragged him back. He stared at the small boy he held in his arms. "Who are you?" he found himself asking. "Where did you come from?" I watched my brother and my father. The truth was very different from where we had learned in school. The truth was that the line between the living and the dead could be, it seemed, murky and blurred.